Go for it.
Log in or sign up for free?
Uh,
It says log in or sign up for free.
I guess.
He already did it.
Okay, so if the destinations aren't there, it's not there. Okay, we're going to get started. So,
Okay.
welcome everyone. My name is Steve Stein, and I'm the host of the Street Smart Wisdom podcast. And today we have a special event with our friend Mark Matousek. We've been doing audios with him. He's been a wise guide, guest expert on Wisdom Feed. And today we have a special event. We are there you go. We're talking about Mark's new book, Lessons from an American Stoic: How Emerson Can Change Your Life. And then on the back it says, these 12 lessons are intended as a roadmap for authentic living, a user's guide to Emerson's forgotten wisdom as it applies to the problems we face today. If you use them well and put them into practice, they have the power to change your life. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you again, and on such a great occasion. So, I know you've been working on this book for a long time. It came out a couple months back. I've been reading through it, and I think for me, it covers some different interests in terms of kind of unveiling what the Stoics are, what's involved with that. I always was familiar with Emerson, although probably more familiar with Thoreau. Now, so why this book now?
Well, I've loved Emerson since college. He really did change my life when I discovered him at a time of real darkness and confusion in my own life. He became a guide for me, and he's been a guide for me for the past 40 years. And it has just seemed to me in the last few years that his message of self-reliance and the whole transcendentalist way of looking at reality is what we need in this age of just hyper materialism and social media violence and violence in the world, that I feel like we've forgotten a lot of what this country was founded on, which was a spiritual awareness of what life is about and who we are as human beings. And so I wanted to do a book that felt approachable for people around Emerson's work. As you were saying, a lot of folks are much more familiar with Thoreau than they are with Emerson, and they don't know that a lot of Thoreau's philosophy came directly from Emerson, who was his mentor. And I wanted to kind of bring Emerson back into the conversation and let people know not only the wisdom of his teachings, but the incredible beauty of his writing. How things are said, I don't have to tell you, how things are said has everything to do with whether people can take them in at a deep level. And Emerson was just unparalleled in his use of the language. You can sit with a page of Emerson for an entire day and just immerse yourself in the beauty of it and the wisdom, and it really does resonate. So people are getting the message of the book, which makes me very happy.
Right. And how would you characterize the message of the book? Cutting through the clutter and getting more connected to nature and to yourself, or?
Well, nature has a lot to do with it. It really is about understanding your potential as a human being. Emerson had this vast sense of what was possible for a human being when we start to awaken to our deep nature, and when we connect to the transcendental, however we do that, either through nature, through prayer, yoga, meditation. There's so many ways of connecting to the transcendent. And when we do that, we gain access to a whole dimension of ourselves that we may not have known was there. And so that's the thing that I fell in love with was Emerson. I've grown up with a very materialistic view of the world. So you're as good as your last paycheck. And it was dog eat dog and get ahead. And Emerson was the first time that I saw a vision of what human life could be about that wasn't based on what you had in the bank or what you were driving or what kind of neighborhood you lived in. It was based on trusting this thing in you that was mysterious and powerful and had so much unique information to give when we kind of get out of the way and acknowledge its presence.
Getting out of the way. That's that's has to do, I guess, also with unlearning and getting out of patterns and and so when I think of transcendental, my son was studying psychology, and that was one of the transcendent that was one of the schools of thought that they were studying, and I was surprised because in my vernacular or my top of mind, I think of TM, transcendental meditation,
Yeah.
as being transcendental, but this is a much different use approach.
It is and it's not, because the truth is that Emerson was very influenced by Eastern philosophy. The Bhagavad Gita was his favorite book, and so they used to call him the Yankee Hindu in Concord, Massachusetts. So he had a real taste for non-dual Eastern philosophy. So transcendental meditation and transcendentalism aren't that far apart. One is a methodology. Transcendentalism, as Emerson coined it, really was a movement against the church of the day. People like today, people were leaving the church, the traditional religion, in droves because it wasn't speaking to their immediate, direct personal experience. People were longing for an immediate experience of the divine or Buddha nature, call it whatever you like. And that's what transcendentalism was all about. It was about put away the books, put away the clergy, put away the institutions, and go into the woods, either literally or figuratively, and be with yourself. And that's what he was all about. That's what transcendentalism was permission for people to access this divine awareness or this spiritual awareness without relying on tradition or priests or clergy or any kind of an intermediary. That's of course why Emerson got in so much trouble. He gave the famous divinity school address to these young boys at Harvard Divinity School and basically said to them, throw away your books, go into the woods. You don't need authorities to find God. And for that, he was excommunicated from Harvard. He was banned from the Harvard campus for 30 years because he had the gall to suggest that the God we're looking for is already within us, that this consciousness, call it whatever you want. A lot of people are turned off by the word God. I know I was for a very long time. So higher consciousness, realizing that higher consciousness is something that we have access to within ourselves, was a radical thing in his day. And it still is, Steve. It's still a radical thing for people to consider that they have God awareness within them or Buddha nature within them. We have such a pessimistic view of human nature in this culture.
Yes, so it's sacrilegious almost to believe in religion or to believe that it's part of me.
It's sacrilegious to think that you don't need some tradition or some permission from some authority to enter the kingdom of heaven, however you define that. I was just listening to a talk of Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Zen Buddhist teacher, and he was talking about the kingdom of heaven, meaning the wise mind kingdom, that what they call the pure land in Buddhism. They're all talking about the same thing in many different terminologies. And what Emerson was saying was, let's just get right to the heart of it, and let's not beat around the bush. And he said, know yourself a man and be a god. You can't get any clearer than that. Know yourself a man and be a god. And that's what self-reliance was all about. Not an ego's self-reliance, but reliance on this consciousness that we share with all other beings and that we find so directly in nature.
Know yourself a man and be a god.
Yeah. Know yourself a man and be a god. He also said there's nothing so weak as an egotist. So for people who, some people kind of back off the term self-reliance. They think it sounds like macho individualism or self-sufficiency, and that's not what it is at all. Self-reliance, as Emerson was talking about, is all about self-trust. It's about trusting this consciousness within us, however you access it, and then listening to what it tells you. We all have this still small voice within ourselves, but we don't listen to it. So he's all about quiet down enough to hear yourself, hear your own inner guidance, and then trust it. The other thing that Emerson was so big on is nonconformity and not going along with the group, not going along with the crowd. So by listening to ourselves instead of trying to imitate other people and please other people and earn their acceptance, that's how we step into our own power.
So say that last part again.
Well, we step into our own power when we stop listening to other people and trying to imitate and jump through hoops and people please. Nonconformity was right at the center of Emerson's philosophy, and how important it is for us to be original. And that's something we were saying at the beginning about how we're not taught this. Buckminster Fuller said everyone's born a genius, but the process of living de-geniuses us. And that's what Emerson was saying too. That by following outside authority at the expense of listening to ourselves, we de-genius ourselves. We forget what it is that we know that's unique to us. But in order to access that, we have to quiet down and be willing to say no to what other people are telling us to do, and trust that deep wisdom within ourselves.
So genius. So we're born a genius, and he kind of gives license to being different, to being unique.
Exactly.
And is that what some of those lessons are in the back of the book? Like, finding your uniqueness and like how do you explore and.
Well, in the back of the book, I put a bunch of spiritual exercises. The Stoics, and Emerson was a Stoic in his own philosophy, and he emulated the Stoic idea that by doing spiritual exercises, that's how we deepen our self-awareness. So I put a whole bunch of spiritual exercises in the back of the book for people to just start to practice this. This is very practical philosophy. It's not abstract at all.
Well, that's one of the things we do. We try to do it, in the podcast and in Wisdom Feed, take ancient ideas down to street level, which I guess Emerson was doing it back in the day because he was studying the religions of the world and kind of not Americanizing it, but making it, not dumbing it down, but making it accessible.
That's all. He wanted people to know that they had the ability within themselves, that it wasn't complicated, and that they didn't have to follow the ways that have been, trodden for thousands of years, that we can discover our own personal, unique, fresh connection to the divine, however you think of the divine. And in that way, you're right. It was very democratic. And he was very anti-hierarchy, and he was very pro-democratic in the sense of all of us being born equal and equally connected to this divine source.
Yeah, so it's very much. The word grounded keeps coming up. It's like esoteric, but it's all of that content is really base and solid. And accessible at the same time. Sometimes that kind of wisdom is so dense you can't really, it's not accessible. But and I've enjoyed going through your book and you kind of distilling it even more. So it's good stuff. For anyone just tuning in, we are talking about Mark's new book, Lessons from an American Stoic: How Emerson Can Change Your Life. And so, what are some of the couple of themes that come through that people are resonating with? The book's been out a couple of months now.
Well, nonconformity is the main one. People love the being reminded that they have guidance inside themselves when they stop to listen to it. And that, particularly today, we live in the age of influencers, social influencers, and everyone trying to kind of join and jump on this bandwagon or that one or this meme or this trend. And Emerson is all about pulling away from that and being true to ourselves and trusting ourselves. That was his primary message, to trust yourself. And that is resonating with a lot of people. That we don't have to measure up to the standards of Instagram or whatever the measure happens to be, and that we can kind of step out of that fray and just be ourselves. It sounds like such a simple thing to do, but it's really hard. Somewhere, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, that to be yourself in a world that's devoted to making you into something else is the greatest achievement. And we are educated from a really
Say that again. That was a good one.
Yeah, it's a great. I'm paraphrasing, but it's to be yourself in a world that is dedicated to making you something else is the greatest achievement. So Emerson is always saying, don't go. It's not about going off into the woods and staying there. We go off into the woods, figuratively or literally, to tone into ourselves, to get balanced and grounded in ourselves. But then we have to re-enter the world, and we have to learn how to hold to our own truth in the midst of all of these combating, conflicting messages that are coming at us at all time, and particularly now in the social media age, we're bombarded with information all the time. So it's only become harder. What has always been true, which is that originality and self-reliance is hard, has now become exponentially more difficult with all of this input that we have all the time. So if Emerson were alive, I predict he would say unplug. We need social media breaks, and we need breaks in nature, and we need time of quiet. He talked about having one well-spent hour a day. If you just have one well-spent hour a day, and it doesn't matter what you do. It can be reflection, it can be reading, it can be journal writing, which was his primary practice. It could be yoga, it can be prayer, it can be walking in the woods. We need to have that time to re-immerse and reconnect if we're going to keep our authenticity in the world. Otherwise, we lose ourselves. Literally, we lose our sense of what is true for us and who we really are.
What's that saying? Be yourself, everyone else is taken.
Exactly.
And but this is resonating with a lot of the kind of themes that we're working on here, and we're excited. We've done a lot of work with James Hillman over the years, and we're working on a summit with his work. But one of his things, the soul's code and the acorn theory, and he goes through. We recorded the lecture and workshop that kind of turned into the book, and it was on Oprah, and all of a sudden it was a big thing. But what still resonates with me, he goes through so-and-so, never finished a class, never, got kicked out of school 3 times. That's Albert Einstein. And he does like 5 of those and he talks about being eccentric as being a good thing. But it's so, we're so, we all, especially when I was younger, there was a little more diversity, but now even to buy different clothes, every mall is a carbon copy of the other. How do you find, to be creative, to be yourself? And, that sounds like it's, to be yourself, and especially with the bombardment of social media. So that's another phrase I love: one well-spent hour a day.
Yeah.
So what could that look like?
Well, like I was saying, that could be journaling. Journaling is an ancient practice. It dates back to the time of the Stoics. And journaling isn't just marking down what happened. It's about examining our thoughts and feelings about what happened and understanding how our minds work. Journaling is a fantastic way of practicing. Time spent in nature, time spent in meditation, dialogue with a friend, like deep dialogue with a like-minded friend, can be a great way of eliciting wisdom and kind of recentering ourselves in what is true. For some people, it's therapy, some form of therapy or spiritual direction. There are many, many ways. What matters is that we are turning inward, because our lives are almost entirely spent focused outward. Until we make a concerted choice and effort to turn inward, we are going to lose the ability to know ourselves. And that's, of course, that's the first step. That's the first injunction of any philosophy, to know thyself. We can't know ourselves if we're constantly looking outward. So that well-spent hour a day is about looking inward. And however you do that, whatever appeals to you is absolutely fine, as long as it's engaged. It's not just about spacing out. It's about sitting down and saying,
Okay.
how am I? What's true for me today? Where do I feel blocked? Where am I in pain? Where do I feel conflict? What do I long for? Asking ourselves those kinds of deep questions is something that we don't do on a regular basis. So we go and pay therapists hundreds of dollars an hour to ask us the kinds of questions that we could actually ask ourselves. Not to put down therapy. Therapy can be really useful, but we don't have to depend entirely on some external person to ask us questions. We can take back that power.
Wow. So it's quiet time, but you're saying it's engaged quiet time.
It's engaged quiet time. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. It's not just about spacing out. It's about reflecting on our experience and the nature of our lives and what is true for us. I don't have to tell you how easy it is to just go on automatic. You just go on automatic and you're swept up in your schedule and the million things you have to do in a week. And you turn around on the weekend, you say, where was I? Where have I been? I haven't met myself for a week. I have forgotten who I am. And when we do that, it's demoralizing, it's depressing. We are disempowered by that. And it also increases loneliness. One of the reasons people are lonely, and I don't have to tell you, there's an epidemic of loneliness in this country now, is that we're not connecting even with ourselves. So not only are we isolated from other people, we're not even paying attention to who we are. So we just feel like we're just floating in the universe without any tether. So what that well-spent hour is about, it's about tethering. It's about connecting ourselves to the present moment. And how we do that is our business.
Yeah, it's almost like the phrase came to mind, like, there's such, between the news and the incessant media dinging and bleeping and blopping and oh my God, who called, or what was this or that, so it's almost like we're punch drunk, and it's like boom, so this is a way to take a step back. And so I know Thoreau was all about like walking in nature, that, so, but his mentor, can you tell us a little bit about their relationship, Thoreau and?
Yeah, sure. They had a tempestuous, profound relationship. A lot of that walking around in nature they did together for years and years. They would tromp through the woods around Concord together. And Thoreau had this encyclopedic knowledge of nature and flora and fauna. And Emerson was completely fascinated by it. So Thoreau was really Emerson's mentor when it came to understanding the minutia of nature, the processes of nature. Thoreau was brilliant with that. In most other ways, Emerson was his mentor. He was 14 years older than Thoreau. Thoreau was brought into the Emerson house as a tutor for Emerson's kids, and he was beloved. particularly by Emerson's wife. Emerson's wife and Thoreau had a very deep relationship. And Thoreau was a difficult person in many ways. So was Emerson in his own ways. But Thoreau took nothing from nobody. I mean, Thoreau had no social more decorum. He was extremely rude, and he was he could be quite belligerent. Emerson was a little bit more buttoned down. He may have been feeling those things, but he didn't always show them. Thoreau didn't care. And that was one of the things that Emerson loved about him. He says somewhere in his journal, Emerson does, that Thoreau kind of embodies his ideal of self-reliance in a way that Emerson himself couldn't always do, because he was a Boston Brahmin. He was basically a pretty repressed, introverted guy. And Thoreau was quite out there. And so Emerson really admired him, and Thoreau also drove him crazy sometimes. And there was a power dynamic that became problematic, as it is always with a mentor-mentee. The mentee kind of outgrows the mentor. There's a power dynamic, and that was true. That was true of them. There were fights, there were conflicts, but Emerson revered Thoreau, and when he died, he gave the most beautiful eulogy for him. And I recommend that folks, look that eulogy up. Particularly if you're a Thoreau fan, it's very, very beautiful.
So it is in some ways a precursor to mindfulness. I know John Kabat-Zinn often quotes Thoreau, but going backwards, what's the lineage of Stoicism?
Well, Stoicism was started in ancient Rome and Greece. 100 years before 2,000 years ago, shortly before the birth of Christ. And it was largely connected to what today you would call cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. It was very pragmatic, and the purpose of Stoic philosophy was to decrease painful emotions. And they found ways, mental tricks and practices, ways of decreasing suffering. So that's what it was, less about devotion and what you would call spiritual life than it was about reducing suffering, in the way that Buddhism is really focused on reducing suffering, as so was Stoicism. So, for example, the Stoics recommended a practice they called memento mori, which is just remembering your own death and remembering mortality on a daily basis, and how doing that frees you of fear. It actually alleviates the fear of death and dying. They talked about something called the view from above, where you would imagine your life from the 40,000-foot view, and what does it look like when you consider your problems and what you're going through, either from that great distance or as if it was happening to somebody else. When you do, that's a really interesting exercise. You're going through something really hard, and then imagine it's happening to somebody else, and notice how your feelings change. And you see that there's insight that comes in there.
Wow, memento mori. Those are that's really interesting stuff. Yeah. And was there like a founder or what?
Yeah, well, Marcus Aurelius was one of the great. I think Zeno founded Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, was a great practitioner of Stoicism, and he wrote his famous Meditations, which are having a huge renaissance these days. Seneca was another great Stoic. Epictetus was a great Stoic. And they all kind of echo this belief in the power of the mind to shift reality. And that when we shift our perception, we shift our lives, we shift our experience of being alive. Another practice they had was called turning the obstacle upside down. And what that is when you're facing something hard, and if you turn it upside down, you realize that the solution is often inside the problem. It's about, we would call it reframing. When you reframe, that has a powerful effect on how stuck you feel with something.
Right. Reframing evokes a whole different feeling than turning something upside down.
Yeah.
Is that
reframing and turning the obstacle upside down are very much the same thing.
So what does so there's a problem, there's a relationship, there's something, a nut you're trying to crack, literally, maybe even, but also figuratively, something you're trying to figure out in your life, what the next path is. So you flip it on its end or turn it
No,
upside down.
you find the potential in the obstacle, in the adverse circumstance, whatever it is. So, for example, I faced a health crisis years ago that really completely turned my life upside down. And instead of it ruining my life, it actually ended up giving me my work, my spiritual practice. It helped me change my life in positive ways that I needed to do, but I would not have done it if I hadn't been forced up against the wall. And that's the value of crisis, as everybody knows, is that you can actually use crisis as an opportunity to free yourself of things that you have been putting off, things you've known were not quite right, but we procrastinate. And then suddenly, when your back's up against the wall, you're forced to make different choices. And that's what this Stoic practice is about. It's about choosing differently. It's about looking at the same set of circumstances through a lens of possibility. Instead of this is the worst thing, it's all over, I'm defeated. What can I do with this? What can I do creatively with this situation that may suck on the surface of it, but in fact has potential if we use our imagination? And that's another big piece of it, is using the imagination. That's something we don't always do. We feel so victimized by our lives. We don't realize, I can change how I am holding that experience.
That's a theme that's come up in a few of the recent live events we've had. There's a term of failure of imagination, with 9/11 and these recent tragedies that are happening. But we had Laura Sims on telling some stories last week, and one of the stories, the humans became animals. And then when the humans became animals, the story changed. And it was just, adding imagination to it just created a whole new, same set of circumstances.
Right.
Maybe it was a bit fanciful, but without the imagination part of it, and that's turning things upside down, I think is part of it.
Yeah. It is. It's looking at things from a different perspective. It's not that complicated. It's not easy, but it's not complicated. It really is about shifting what Emerson called the angle of vision. We each look through our eyes at our experience through a particular angle of vision, and until we question that angle of vision, we're stuck in it. And what happens with crisis is we realize we have to change the way we're living it. We're forced to look at things anew and to be a little more flexible and to not be so attached to our opinions. And that's what shifting point of view is about. It's about just saying, I can look at it this way and I can look at it that way, and both are true. But we get so attached to our perspective when we narrow and narrow until we think that really is the only reality. And of course, that is absurd.
John Kabat-Zinn has a thing he talks of, orthogonal view, which is similar to the angle of vision. It's like kind of dialing it in a little differently.
Yeah.
Almost like a CAD CAM. I mean, turning it upside down or a different angle to, and in just doing that, it kind of brings you present. It gives you another way to approach what's going on or what is.
It does. And another important piece of this is that you're no longer a victim. When you realize that you have the ability to shift your perspective, and you have the ability to ask questions, to do things differently, to make different kinds of choices, you're not a victim. Right? It shifts you out of that victim mentality. I work with students all the time who are stuck in this victim trauma narrative. And until they learn, we all learn that until you shift that, nothing changes. You're a prisoner of this fixed idea. But as long as you can keep asking questions and you can keep changing, you can learn, you can question, you're not a victim. You're an agent. You have agency. It may be limited agency, but it's agency nonetheless. And we relinquish our own sense of agency. We relinquish the awareness that we have. We have creative imagination and that we can do things differently.
And how relevant is all this today, where life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans, and it's Friday again. That's what my wife and I say. And we try to walk, we try to, meditate at least a few times a week. But fuck, it's Friday again. It's like, what? How did that happen? And it's like, did I miss a week? Well, I hope not. But did I,
That's exactly what I was saying earlier, that we turn around and we say, where have I been for the last 5 days? Where have I been for the last week? That's how unpresent we are in our lives. That's how distracted and how sort of swept away in our mind stream we are most of the time. That's why that one well-spent hour a day matters so much. And if it's not a well-spent hour, Steve, let it be a well-spent 10 minutes. Sometimes it's just 10 minutes to just sit down and say, well, let's stop. Before I leap into my day, how am I? How am I? Where does it hurt? What do I need? What do I long for? What kind of self-care is called for, right? I mean, those kinds of questions, we can do that in 10 or 15 minutes if you don't have an hour. But if we don't do that, we're guaranteed to live the kind of life you're talking about, which is basically sleepwalking through our lives.
And 1 hour well spent, and I think a key word, wellness, well spent. It's like no one could go to the gym for you, right?
That's right.
No one could take that hour for you. And
no.
Beatrice says, anyone who's watching, if they have any questions, please drop them in the question. Beatrice says, such powerful insights, and to be ourselves. I think that's a big part of, of agency is, and if you're not in touch with yourself. So we're doing, it's great, this stuff. And now I have to, and there's an audio book too. We're talking about lessons from an American Stoic, Mark's new book. And it's just great. It's just great stuff. We're doing a summit, another summit coming up on technology and depression and AI and wellness and tech life balance, and totally has to do with all the distractions that are going on. Yeah. So okay. So I love that. A well-spent hour. What else is comes out, some of the other couple of key lessons in the book?
Well, there's an important lesson in there about nature and why it is that nature is so nutritious for us, why we need nature to remember our own divinity, our own spirituality, whatever you want to call it. And what Emerson says is that when you're in the presence of nature, and by nature he means non-man-made things, it reminds you that you are nature. We have this idea that there's me and then there's nature, when in fact, of course, we are nothing but nature. We grow directly out of nature. And when you go into the woods, you realize I am no different than these trees. I can move, but I am nature. And getting that opens your mind and connects you to everything that's outside of your ego, your sort of self-enclosed identity. And that is empowering. That's energizing. And so he talks about there being a stream of power that runs through. To step into this stream, we have to know that it's there and step into it. And when we do, we are actually carried by it. Emerson talks a lot about the one mind, that we all are a result of one mind, that we're sort of billions of people partaking of a single consciousness. And nature helps us to tune into that one mind, to the mind of God, Buddha mind, whatever you want to call it. And so we need to find times in our lives when we can detach from man-made things and go into the innocence of the forest, or the innocence of the beach, and the innocence of the natural world, to revivify, to refresh, regenerate that part of ourselves that is nothing but nature.
And is there one lesson that that's in the book that someone could try, who's listening to the pod, to get a taste of what the lessons are? Because there's lessons for each chapter, right?
Yes. There are spiritual exercises at the end of the book for each chapter. And then at the end of each chapter, I've just done a little encapsulation in brief to give people a sense, a kind of distillation, condensation of what the teaching is. I've really tried to make the book user friendly. One of the things that people get that interferes sometimes with Emerson, and even with Thoreau, is the language. The language, that 19th century American language, can feel a little bit distant. And I wanted to make, sorry?
A little heady.
A little heady, right. So I wanted to ground it, and I wanted to apply it to our vernacular today. And so honestly, I would start with the chapter on nonconformity. I think it does encapsulate Emerson's teachings as well as any of the other lessons.
And nonconformity, and you were saying earlier about being an individual, being yourself, and it's hard to even know that if you don't take that, switch the angle of vision, or take the well-spent hour each day.
Yeah, and another important piece of this we haven't mentioned is that Emerson talks a lot about contradictions, the fact that we're all a mass of contradictions, and that we are, we're brave and we're cowardly, we're greedy and we're generous on any given day. We kind of cover the waterfront, and that what he calls originality is about accepting our own contradictions instead of pretending they're not there, and then forming them into something that is unique for ourselves. He talks about what Emerson calls the law of compensation, that for every sweet, there's a sour, for every strength, there's a weakness. And that so often our greatest gifts grow out of our wounds. They grow out of our limitations. And so looking at ourselves and our lives through a paradoxical lens is very important to Emerson, and holding that both are true. We are so polarized in our thinking. We say, I'm a good person, I'm not a bad person. We have this mind that wants to cut everything in half. We're both. The truth is we're both. Walt Whitman said, do I contradict myself very well? Then I contradict myself. I'm vast. I contain multitudes. We all contain multitudes within us. And being a spiritual grown-up really is about acknowledging that, and not pretending to be better than we are, and not pretending to be more virtuous than we are, and not pushing away our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, our limitations. It's important to accept those as part of what make us human, and that open our hearts to other people.
Right. So it's not only two things can be true at the same time, but many things can be true at the same time.
That's the essence of wisdom. I don't have to tell that. You've been in this
world.
No,
you're saying it beautifully. Yeah.
But that is the essence of wisdom, to hold two contradictory truths in your mind at the same time, without either one canceling the other one out. So it's enlarging your mind, so you don't have to binary everything. You say, yes, I'm good and I'm bad. I'm brave and I'm cowardly. All of these things are true. The Roman philosopher Horace said, nothing human is foreign to me. Nothing human is foreign. I contain all the possibility for all those kinds of experiences. It just depends on the day, and it depends on the circumstances.
Nelson writes in, everything is on a spectrum, almost nothing is absolute.
Exactly. That's right. That's it. It is all on a spectrum, and the absolute is ineffable. The absolute, if you're talking about God or the divine, that's beyond language. But the truth is that we are almost everything that matters is both, and it's not. They're not one or the other. It's not either or.
Yeah, and that's the tension of the opposites, or is where the good stuff is.
It is.
It's also where it's so easy to check out. To avoid that level of being uncomfortable. But if you can kind of be with it, there's a chance for something that is unique, that can make you unique, instead of just dumbing it down and going through your life.
Exactly. That's where 1 + 1 equals more than 2. So that 2 become more than the sum of their parts. They used to talk about this as the coincidentio oppositorum. It's the sacred marriage of opposites. That there's something sacred in the opposites that creates something that's larger than both of them. And you know that from relationships. I mean, sometimes you're in a relationship with someone and you're very, very different. And sometimes you're forced to come into an awareness that's bigger than both of you. If you're going to reconcile, if you're going to understand one another, you have to get over your narrow way of seeing. And that's when your opposites become your best friends. Emerson said at some point, there comes a time in every man's life when he learns to thank his faults and he learns to thank his enemies, because they're our greatest teachers. So opposites aren't the enemies.
Right. The faults, and Nelson had mentioned about the acorn theories, but and our eccentricities are what makes us, but we're so conditioned to toe the line and just get through the day and pay your taxes.
And you wonder why people are depressed. I mean, God, totally. It strips you of everything that's human and everything that's unique and interesting and juicy and soulful. All of that is stripped away in the name of efficiency. And you have a whole culture of people trying to be efficient in a machine-like way and check all the dots and check all the boxes, and it's no way to live. There's no imagination in it.
Right. So, okay, I think we covered we covered some good bases. Now, how can people find you?
Yes, people can find me one of two ways. They can come to my website, which is markmatousek.com, or they can come to theseekersforum.com, which is my online global community that's centered on self-inquiry and using what I call writing to awaken as a path of self-discovery. So theseekersforum.com or markmatousek.com.
Excellent. And of course, there you go. Lessons from an American Stoic, how Emerson can change your life. Would you consider yourself an American Stoic?
So I'm a little allergic to labels. But yes, I consider myself, among other things, an American Stoic.
Right, because it's multifaceted. That's what we're talking about.
Exactly.
All right. So, any last words, or at this point?
Great. It's great to see you, Steve. I always love our conversations. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, that was great. So this is Steve Stein. We're the Street Smart Wisdom podcast, brought to you by Wisdom Feed, which is our community that we're building with the whole idea of finding connection with people. We saw a couple of members, welcome, who have been chiming in and messaging me. So, Mark Matousek, good luck with the book. Congratulations, Mazel Tov on the book, and all the best. And I look forward to continuing the conversation soon. And Beatrice says the embracing of it all. So that's a good place to stop. All right, Mark, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Steve.